clinic, which I was a big part of back then, operated out of an old house on Brown.
I remember, yeah.
And how we recruited people into the clinic, because for some reason it wasn't all that popular in the early days, was we had a kegerator. And free beer. And so
Did
that's
Judge Price have anything to do with this? If I'm remembering that correctly?
So that
Maybe
was,
this should be recorded for this.
but this is so it's come a long way. I'm very impressed and very honored to be here, frankly.
Thank you.
The challenge for me was, what's my role? This program, can you hear me, by the way? This program, when I came, I had been in place for about 8 years, a little over 8 years. And I'll tell you the one thing when I came to the bench that I didn't want to do was what irritated me the most when I was a lawyer. And that was when I had a hearing in front of a judge. And the judge decided to pontificate about the state of affairs. When the judge was the least informed person in the room as to what was going on. Not wanting to be that person, and being handed this document provided opportunities for me. The experts are already in place. My role is to convene them and give them a laboratory in which to operate. And that is my role in the experiments, the processes that the experts in early childhood development and in treatment can work with. Then my role is to make sure that the parents who are in my courtroom leave my courtroom understanding what just happened. That is an important role not only for me, but for the lawyers that represent these parents. You can put yourself in their shoes, especially early on in the case, like the removal hearing or adjudication. And they've had their child or children whisked away. And in our court, Safe Babies Court, hopefully that was less of a traumatic experience because there was a pre- or post-removal conference in which they were involved in and had some say in where their children were going and what their children's needs were. But nevertheless, they're coming to court with their child in the room. Now they're seeing some guy on the road come out and a court reporter, and all of a sudden, the intimidation factor is well underway. And you can talk to these people and encourage them and tell them what's going to happen, what is happening, what's going to happen next, which I view as a big role of mine, is to make sure that we explain this is the purpose of this hearing, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we've done. And then tell them what's going to happen the next time, and explain that, and try to answer their questions. No matter how much we do that, and no matter how much a parent nods and tells you that they have no questions, I know that they're not hearing most of what's being said. And that's why the attorney's role, in my role in encouraging the attorneys that are representing parents in these cases, is to make sure that they debrief with their client after each hearing, before the next hearing. But it's important right away after a hearing to simply not say, okay, you heard the judge. Good job, see you next time. They don't know what just happened. And so it's very important to go over what just happened, process it with them. I think that takes large leaping steps towards potential success. My other role, the way I see it, this point in the Safe Babies Court, and just so you understand what is Safe Babies, you know, from my perspective, there are 6 juvenile courtrooms in Polk County. I don't know what the percentage of cases that involve the removal of a child between the ages of 0 and 3. But I don't get all of it. Doesn't mean all cases of 0 to 3 come to Judge Simon. Thank God. This court is runs between about 15 and 20 cases. And what we're trying to do is, as I said, convene a laboratory to find out what practices work best, and then try to expand on those practices throughout not just the other cases that I have, but the cases that the other 5 judges have in Polk County, and then throughout the state. For instance, we had to talk last month to attorneys and judges throughout the state about what we do. It's a great opportunity for us to tell about what the successes are. So, Safe Babies Court is an experimental court, so to speak, and where we're doing things that provide opportunities for better success. And I try to keep that in mind. My other role is to encourage not just parents of these children. It's important to try to keep encouraging them, to make them understand that once we get past the adjudication stage, we try to be a team. We try to all work on the same page and work towards the same goal. And I try to make them understand that, help them understand that from the beginning. But I also want my role to be that I encourage the attorneys in the room. I encourage the professionals who all show up at these hearings by trying to involve them and find out, ask questions about what's going to be helpful, what they can do, what we all can do, so that we all stay motivated as we work towards a resolution. So those are the things that I view as my role as being important. Go on and on about all the things that happen within those confines. But probably can expand on that a little later. I don't know if that answers your question about where I'm at. That's the way I do things. 11, 12 years into this program, what the judges role is.
That's great, Judge Simon, thanks. So Tracy, we come to you, and so from DHS's point of view, you get a new case with a really young child, whether in Safe Babies Court or not. What's the social worker confronting from the very beginning?
Well, I was one of the social workers when I started at DHS that Dr. Shaw referred to. So 16 years ago, I was a child protective assessment worker, and I would go to homes in the middle of the night. I would go to daycares, I would go to schools, and I would have a police officer with me, and I'd have a court order signed by a judge, and I would take that child with me and put him in foster care. And I would tell the parents, we'll see you in a couple weeks at the removal hearing, and we'll let you know what's happening then. And when I came to the department, I was very interested in strength-based practice, but it wasn't the mode of the day. And I see Safe Babies Court teams as kind of a precursor to practice that we have now. And I look at the young social workers coming in, and they work in Safe Babies Court teams. They have, Judge Seidlin mentioned our pre-removal conferences. This effort was precursor to all of the strength-based practices that we have now. So we talked about pre-removal conferences, which grew from this effort. And that's where, as a social worker, I didn't take that baby in the middle of the night anymore. I went to the parents and said, you know what, your kiddo isn't safe tonight. Who in your family doesn't have a criminal background, doesn't have a history with the Department of Human Services and Child Abuse that would preclude them from being placement? Where can your baby go tonight? And tomorrow, bring all your supports to the office and we're going to talk. Precursor to the parent partner program, where we started started matching parents who've been through our system and had their kids removed with parents who are new to our system so that they can walk them through what will be happening to them. So all of these practices that we have embedded really grew from this effort of recognizing, like Dr. Shaw said, the child's voice. I think the biggest challenge for our social workers with kiddos 0 to 3, first of all, is that time frame that we're working under. According to the Adoption and Safe Families Act, Brent was right. We have 6 months from the date that judge signs that removal order to get kids returned home. And the majority of our cases are families that are abusing substances, mostly methamphetamine, now prescription, abusing prescription drugs, and heroin. We're seeing an influx of heroin in our area in the eastern side of our state. And those families, it takes a lot longer than that 6 months to be successful in treatment and be able to assume care of their kids again. The other thing we're really seeing is cases with severe domestic violence. And we all know, women who are in a domestically violent relationship leave an average of 7 times. Well, it's probably not in the first 6 months that we become involved. So those time frames and these issues that we're seeing that are so significant for parents, that's a huge challenge. I think our workers would say, because our workers have to assess a child's safety using 3 safety constructs. So we look at child vulnerability, and these kids are our most vulnerable kids, right? The threat of maltreatment is our second safety construct. So what's the threat of a repeat maltreatment? If parents are using drugs, if parents are in a domestically violent relationship, that's a huge threat of maltreatment for a kid who's incredibly vulnerable. The third thing we look at is the parent's protective capacities. What we mandate for our social workers is that they have to visit all of the kids on their caseloads once a month. They have to visit all of the parents, and they have to visit all of the placements. If we got a 7-year-old or a teenager, they can tell us if they're safe or not. They can talk to us about what's happening with them. And these kiddos can't do that. So the workers that are involved with Safe Babies Court Team, they have to rely on all of these resources they have with the team to talk to them about child development, to talk to them about childhood trauma. Back in my day, we thought the kids were better off over in foster care. Well, now we know so much about ACEs and childhood trauma. We know how much that affected those kids. And I look back on the kids that I worked with 16 years ago, and I want to write every single one of them a letter of apology. So we now are using these best practices that we've learned to try and enhance the experience that the kids have moving through our system. But I think our workers would say, with these young children, their increased vulnerability and threat of maltreatment, and our ability to assess safety without being able to ask them what happened to them. So they have to be knowledgeable about ages and stages. They have to be knowledgeable about child development. They have to be knowledgeable about trauma. They have to be knowledgeable about behavioral indicators, and they really do rely on their experts in the team to help with that. So I think that they would say that's their biggest challenge. The Department of Human Services went through a child and family service review a few years back. We're getting ready to go through it again. One of the things that we failed in is placement stability. So kids have placement after placement after placement. And we first took a look at it and thought, okay, it's the obnoxious teenagers. They got into a home and people were like, no way, I can't handle this. And so we did a study, and what we realized is it was our kids 1 and under. It was our kids 6 months and under, because they would get, hopefully with a relative.
And that's a national trend. There was a national trend.
The kiddo was crying all night. They didn't have good child care. There's lots of things about that kid's development that made even the relatives give up. And sometimes it's a good change because it's a relative that's more able to care for the child, but sometimes it's to foster placement, sometimes it's to the crisis nursery. So placement stability for our very, very young babies has been an issue for us. So what we're learning in Safe Babies Court Teams about how to support parents and how to support relatives and hopefully ask for extensions of the time frame, those are some of the challenges I think that our workers and supervisors face dealing with this population.
So I want to leave some time for questions, but first I want to do sort of a quick round through all of you about, we'll start with you, Judy. What are the big things that you think you're doing in 0 to 3 work that we should be pushing out other places? What are maybe a couple top things you think you'd say we could be doing better in cases generally?
Well, I think continuous and ongoing training, I don't know how many of you are law students, but you're coming into this realm, and all that we talk about here is like, what? Wait a minute, this isn't law school. But if we don't have that collaborative partnership with legal counsel, we don't get very far either. And I think Kat can even attest to it. You have lawyers that come in and have never heard of this, right? And rightfully so. You know, they went to law school to be a lawyer, not, you know, a child development expert or anything like that. But when we can work together, and I didn't know anything about law when this started, and I went to court and I testified, you know, in Judge Cohen's courtroom, and I thought I knew everything, right? And sitting there and observing court and watching the interactions of the lawyers and what the lawyers have to go through and what they have to follow and how they advocate for their parents or for their clients was something I needed to learn. So I think the constant awareness and training, changing laws, you know, lawyers need to help us social workers understand when there might be a change in the laws. You know, the community coordinator is in existence so that in case you have any questions about what resources your clients might need, she's the one. She's like the United Way 411, you know, website that I don't even know if it's in existence anymore, but CAT is in existence. So I think that's a constant challenge. Is we want everybody to be very aware and have this team approach, because it can happen in any courtroom. But like Judge Seidlin said, you have to have a place where you can experiment a little bit, because sometimes when you try things, it's not going to work out all that great. And you're going to go, well, maybe we should tweak this a little bit, and that's an opportunity to do it. And then you come back to the table and say, now how can we spread this out to the other courtrooms in Polk County or across the state or across the country? And so what 0 to 3 is doing is that we have, I think we have a total of 15 sites right now around the country that we're doing research to see how effective we are. I know that here's what we've been effective with. We've been effective with decreasing the number of placements, very traumatic on children. Can you imagine moving totally out of your environment into a new family home? You know nothing about them. As an adult, as a reasonable thinking adult, can you imagine what that does for you? It's very traumatic on children. We are studying, you know, the number of placements and the impact of our number of visits that go on, studying that impact, seeing if we can be effective across the country and across the board, and then implementing it in other courtrooms besides just our learning lab. 0 to 3 is not a service. We are a program and an approach that tries to find the services and the resources that are out there. Because if we try to create new ones, you guys know what happens to those. The grant money runs out, and then this wonderful idea that you had has to dissolve, right? So we really need a lot of partnerships, ongoing awareness and understanding, and people's willingness to step out of their comfort zone of their own profession so that they can learn and understand other professions so that they can advocate for their client the most. Kat, you know, she needs to learn about law. You know, Judge Seidlin needs to learn about early childhood stuff. He might have raised kids, but he sure didn't go to college to learn about early childhood. We just learned everything from Dr. Shaw. So. And knowing how the child welfare system works, you know, the stuff that they have to go through. When you develop an appreciation and an understanding of what the Child Welfare Agency goes through, you learn that supporting them instead of holding them accountable and pointing fingers at them and finding ways that you can help them accomplish what's best for those families is so much more productive. They have a lot on their plate. They have a lot of regulations that they have to go by, not just laws, but their own state regulations within the agency. knowing what they have to do and always being aware and submerge yourself in all of these community functionings that are happening, because you'll be amazed at what you can learn and how it's going to impact your profession.
Dr. Shaw, the same kind of question to you. What do you think you want to, what would you promote as the most important
No,
practices?
I agree with Judy, what she has said. I would say building partnerships is very important and thinking out of the box. You know, for my profession, it wasn't a common practice to go outside of the clinic. People came to you, but I learned that I can do more when I went out of that building. And I didn't have to only talk to my physician and nurses, but I needed to talk to everybody that was connected to that child and to that family. And you know, in an old time, there was not a whole lot of friendship, buddy-buddy system between the lawyers and the doctors. But some of my best resources have been the lawyers who know they can pick up the phone and call me anytime, any question and all that. And I would say that Safe Babies Code is not a program that can exist in isolation. It's a concept that you can find in any community where you have the resources, and that's what we need to tell you. Because if you want to start, like Judy said, everything from the start, we can't create a new program. That's not going to be successful. You already have all the components, except they are not talking to each other. You don't have the communication. You always will have a medical professional, not necessarily a pediatrician. You have nurse practitioner, you got family practitioner, you got early childhood everywhere. You have mental health professionals. You've got visiting nurses in every community. All you guys need to do is, when you're representing as a legal counsel, as for representing the parents and the child, where can I find that? And just go and approach those people and say, here is what I need from you. You don't need to sit down and go over the child development books and learn all yourself. You've got the resources and say, okay, what are the needs of this child that I need to be aware of, because I am representing this child and I need to know that. You need to go to the mental health professional. What do I need to know about this parent's need? You know, and those resources are available in every community. And you need to go to the social worker and say, what can you do to help me coordinate that? And then, as Judy said, your resources, the Safe Babies coordinator. Okay, I need to know what resources I can tap into in my community, and pull those team members together. And I think that's just think out of the box.
One of my students recently called an early access worker in one of our cases, who's not one of the typical ones I think that we see often in our Safe Babies Court team, and just asked, for some input about a bunch of kind of things that were happening in the case. And the early access worker kind of was taken aback and said, well, I think you might be the first person that's ever called me from a law firm before.
Exactly.
And the student was really proud that she learned a lot, from talking to her.
I would have to say some of the original lawyers that, I won't mention any names, some of the original lawyers that have worked with us, they said they liked the fact that they learned about those other disciplines, because when they went to advocate for their client, that gave them a little extra leverage to challenge and push back with people who weren't providing them what they were obligated to provide. So it's kind of a nice little tool to have in the tool belt.
Yes. Yes.
So, Judge Seidlin, is there anything that you've seen in Safe Babies Court practice that you would really kind of encourage other courts to adopt?
I would boil it down to two things, one internal, one external. Internal being frequent hearings, frequent family team meetings. For instance, a system where, starting with the removal hearing, you're having a hearing or a family team meeting every month. So that all the professionals, all the parties, lawyers, are getting together, either in court or in a family team meeting every month to keep things moving along, keep people interested. Second judge can do that by the power of convening. It's an amazing thing that I learned when I got this job. So all I got to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, would you like to get together? Yes, Judge. It's an amazing thing, just because I got that designation. So it's a power that's unique to the judge, power to convene. And I would suggest that all judges doing juvenile work convene their resources, get together and talk to each other. The lawyers ought to be advocating for that convening. We call them stakeholders meetings. They happen on a bi-monthly basis here. And it's amazing. You get the experts, you get the community resources talking to each other, and ideas just start growing. What can we do? Oh, I know. We can call this person, get this person, and start talking. And then if you've got lawyers, and we have lawyers in these meetings with these resources, now these lawyers gain the knowledge of what's available in the community and bring it to court. And it just grows. And that's something you don't need 0 to 3 or safe babies court. You just need people that are interested and can talk a judge into using his or her power to convene and get it started. And you'll be amazed in every community what can be done. Those are the two things that I think are the most important that spread easily throughout the state.
Thanks, Judge. Tracy?
Well, I absolutely concur with the judge on the first point. The frequent court hearings, the frequent family team meetings, the frequent professional staffings, our workers and supervisors feel very supported by that, and they can convey that support down to the families. I think the second thing that our workers would say they can carry throughout their caseload, our workers average 40 to 45 cases, is this idea of family engagement. You know, we know kids do better when they're with their families, and families do better when they feel supported by all of the parties at court. So this idea that they're touching people involved in their case once a month and feeling supported by all of them. I was in a meeting with a relative placement for a baby that's part of Safe Babies Court teams just this week, and she felt incredibly supported by the guardian ad litem, by the mom's attorney, and by the early access worker. DHS came in like a solid 4th, but so this idea of all of those parties giving those parents a positive message throughout the duration of their case, I think really enhances their participation in services and lends to that reunification sooner. And I think that's something that our workers and supervisors can translate to all of the kiddos on their caseload.
So before we go to questions, I want to let Kat have the last word in a sense. I'm going to put her on the spot. You know, as a coordinator for this team, I mean, one of the things that I've seen that's really great about what Judy did and what you do now is that you're a problem solver, right? So when we have a coordinator in these meetings, you know, the mom can say, I haven't been able to get into counseling, right? And you work at CFI, so you're able to get on the phone and help her do it. That's not a resource that's present in every court across the state, right? So how can we help people do better with the value that you add in these cases?
Well, you're right in that I try to be a problem solver whenever I can, and I know that Judy has experience with that too. But sometimes I can't solve all the problems, and you know, obviously